She was just filling her tank when she disappeared. No calls, no clues, no witnesses. 5 years later, her son was scrolling through a second-hand app and saw something he never thought he'd see again: her bracelet. What he did next unraveled a secret no one saw coming. The gas station stood alone at the edge of the highway, its flickering overhead lights buzzing like tired insects against the inky black sky. It was almost 11:30 p.m. when Ashley Miller pulled into the lot, the tires of her faded silver sedan crunching over scattered gravel and broken glass. Her 4-year-old son, Luca, stirred in the back seat, still clutching the edge of his dinosaur-patterned blanket. They had been on the road for nearly 3 hours, returning from a weekend visit to Ashley's mother 2 towns over. It had been a long day, filled with small talk, too much casserole, and Luca's non-stop chatter with Grandma about everything from bugs to cartoons. Ashley had been grateful for the time away, but now she just wanted to get home, put her son to bed, and sink into the couch with a glass of wine and some silence. She parked next to the only other car at the station, a beat-up blue pickup with no license plate on the front. A quick glance around the lot gave her no reason for concern. It was one of those 24-hour gas stations attached to a convenience store, the kind where the coffee always tasted burnt and the hot dogs rotated endlessly under heat lamps. A neon sign buzzed in the window, "Open all night." Ashley looked back at Luca, who had fallen asleep again. His soft curls clung to his forehead, and his seatbelt was still buckled snug across his chest. "Mommy's just going to run in real quick," she said softly, even though he couldn't hear. "Don't go anywhere, okay?" She kissed his temple, tucked the blanket back around him, and locked the doors once she stepped out. The air was cool and carried a faint smell of exhaust and oil. She adjusted the thin jacket around her shoulders and hurried toward the entrance. Inside, the store was brightly lit and empty except for the man behind the counter, a heavy-set guy in his 30s, watching a small TV mounted on the wall. He barely looked up when she entered. Ashley moved quickly, grabbing a bottle of water and a pack of crackers. She hesitated at the counter, her hand resting over her wrist. The bracelet was there, silver, delicate, with a small charm that bore her son's initials. A birthday gift from her mother when Luca was born. She wore it every day. It had become her armor, her reminder, her promise. Back outside, the car remained exactly where she'd left it, fogged slightly from the inside. Luca still slept. Ashley swiped her card and began pumping gas. The numbers ticked upward slowly. She looked around again. Nothing out of the ordinary. No one lurking. No strange cars. Just silence and the faint glow of the vending machines humming against the side wall. She capped the tank and headed back into the store to grab a coffee to stay awake for the last leg of the drive. And that was the last confirmed moment anyone saw Ashley Miller. 10 minutes later, the store clerk looked up from his TV, startled by the sound of a horn. A child was crying, loud. Panicked, he walked outside and saw a small boy standing barefoot next to a car, pounding on the door. The driver's side was open. No one inside. The child's face was blotchy and tear-streaked. "Mommy," he wailed, pointing toward the store. "Mommy didn't come back." The clerk rushed over, unsure of what to do. The child was alone, the car still running. He looked around the lot. No one. He went back into the store to check the security footage. Ashley had walked in, bought a bottle of water and crackers, left, pumped gas, and came back inside. But there was no footage of her leaving again. No sign of where she'd gone after she returned. It was as if she had vanished inside the store or just outside its door, within the span of 2 minutes. The police arrived 20 minutes later. The child couldn't explain much, just that his mommy had told him to wait in the car. He cried until he vomited. Inside the store, officers reviewed the footage again and again. Ashley's last movements were clear: walking to the back of the store, picking up coffee, then moving out of frame. She never walked back into view. No one else entered during that time. No one left. No signs of struggle. No witnesses. Her car was intact. Her wallet was in the driver's seat. Her phone lay between the seats, dead. The only thing missing was her. In the following days, search teams combed the nearby woods and roadside ditches. Flyers with her photo, shoulder-length dark hair, hazel eyes, a hopeful smile, were posted in every window. News reports described her disappearance as sudden and without explanation. Social media lit up with theories: abduction, carjacking gone wrong, runaway. None made sense. Ashley's mother, Denise, took custody of Luca and moved him into her home. The little boy was inconsolable for weeks. At night, he clutched his dinosaur blanket and whispered, "Mommy went inside. Mommy's still in the store." No signs were ever found. No blood, no prints, no personal items except the bracelet which she'd still been wearing that night. Two was never recovered. Ashley Miller had simply vanished, into the light, into the night, into silence. And for 5 years, nothing changed. Until a Tuesday afternoon in early spring, when 9-year-old Luca Miller saw something online that made his heart stop. Something small, something silver, and something that had once been wrapped around his mother's wrist. 5 years is a long time when you're a child. Long enough to forget the sound of someone's voice. Long enough for a memory to grow blurry at the edges. But not long enough to stop feeling their absence like a cold spot in your chest. Luca Miller was 9 years old now, and in many ways he looked like a normal kid, quiet, serious for his age, with the same soft curls he had when he was 4, though they were shorter now, always trimmed neatly by his grandmother. He still slept with his old dinosaur blanket folded at the foot of the bed, though he'd never admit that to anyone outside the house. And he still carried a photo in his backpack, creased and worn from years of handling, of his mother holding him as a baby, both of them grinning in a sunlit park. He didn't remember everything about her, but he remembered enough. He remembered the soft tick of her car's turn signal when they drove at night. He remembered how she used to sing the radio commercials louder than the music, just to make him laugh. He remembered how she always made him pancakes shaped like animals on Sunday mornings. And he remembered her bracelet. It was silver and delicate, with a small charm that sparkled when it caught the light. He didn't remember the exact words on the charm, just that it had letters on it. But he remembered the sound it made when she picked up her coffee mug. A soft, musical clink that was hers and hers alone. After her disappearance, the bracelet had become a symbol. The police mentioned it early on. It hadn't been found in the car or at the gas station. Denise, his grandmother, held on to the detail like a lifeline. "Someone has it," she'd said more than once. "Someone knows something." At first, there had been hope. Investigators from the state came in. Flyers went up. The security footage was reviewed again and again. It became a local obsession. How could a young woman disappear from a well-lit gas station without a trace? But then the news cycles moved on. Tips dried up. The detective assigned to the case transferred to another department. And Ashley Miller's file was quietly marked inactive, pending new leads. Denise never gave up, though. She kept a binder filled with articles, copies of security footage stills, timelines. She attended missing persons support groups in nearby towns and even appeared on a local TV special 2 years after Ashley disappeared. She paid out of pocket for a private investigator who found nothing but dead ends and vanished after 3 months. Meanwhile, Luca grew. He started school. He learned to make his own cereal. He got used to falling asleep in a different house with a different routine. Denise tried to shield him from too much pain, but it was impossible. He'd wake up screaming some nights. Other times, he'd spend hours silently drawing his mother's face, just from memory. He hated birthdays and holidays. He hated people asking about his parents. And most of all, he hated the gas station. It was still open. Denise never went there, never even drove past it, but Luca had seen it once on the way to a field trip. It looked exactly the same. Empty lot, buzzing lights, the place where the world had broken. On the 5-year anniversary, a local news station called Denise for a follow-up story. She refused. "We don't need to remember what we've never forgotten," she told the reporter. That day, they stayed home. Denise made pancakes in the shape of stars. Luca barely ate. He spent most of the day in his room, rereading old comic books and sorting through his baseball cards. But later that evening, as the sun dipped low, he wandered into the living room where Denise sat folding laundry and scrolling through Facebook Marketplace on her tablet. She was looking at used bikes, hoping to surprise Luca with one for the spring. "Any color preference?" she asked absently, but he didn't respond. He sat beside her, resting his chin on her shoulder, watching as she swiped through listings. An old red mountain bike, a purple cruiser with streamers on the handlebars, a beaten-up BMX with a cracked seat. Then something shimmered on the screen, a listing titled, "Vintage Silver Bracelet, $20, like new." The photo was low quality, taken under a yellow light, but the bracelet in it was unmistakable. Luca's heart stopped. The silver band, the shape of the charm, and the engraving partially visible but just enough to read LM. He reached out with trembling fingers and tapped the image. Denise didn't understand at first. "It's just a bracelet, sweetie," she said, but Luca shook his head. "That's hers," he whispered. "That's Mommy's." Denise looked closer, her breath catching in her throat. 5 years of grief had taught her to be careful, to check facts before letting hope rise. But as she stared at the photo, her chest tightened. It wasn't just a similar bracelet. It was the bracelet. The engraving was exactly how she remembered it. Forever. Her daughter's initials, and the word she used to say when she kissed Luca goodnight. Forever. She tapped the seller's name. See? Buyer. No profile photo. No ratings. Location listed as private. Will meet locally. The listing had gone up just 2 days ago, in another state 2 hours from them. Her hands trembled as she clicked, "Message seller." She typed, "Hello, is this still available? I'm interested." No reply. She waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Luca stared at the screen like it might vanish. Then a reply came, "Still have it. We'll meet in person. Cash only." No name, no pleasantries, just cold, impersonal instructions. Denise replied carefully, "Where are you located? Would love to meet today if possible." Another pause. Then, "I'll be at South Point Flea Market this Saturday. Booth 41. She looked at the calendar. Saturday was 3 days away. She typed, "Can I call or text you directly?" No answer. Denise stared at the screen, her mind racing. Was this real? Was it a scam? Was it possible, after all this time, that someone had found Ashley's bracelet or had taken it, and if they had her bracelet, what else did they know? She turned to Luca, who was still watching, wide-eyed. "We're going," she said softly. "We're going to find out." The South Point Flea Market was the kind of place where everything had a story. Rows of makeshift booths stretched across a sun-baked parking lot, tents, tarps, folding tables. Vendors sold everything from hand-carved signs and homemade candles to used toys, dusty books, and mismatched furniture. The scent of fried food and stale coffee hung in the air. Shoppers meandered slowly, clutching iced drinks and plastic bags full of treasures. It was Saturday morning, and the lot buzzed with casual energy, except for one small sedan parked near the back, where a woman and a boy sat quietly, watching the entrance. Denise hadn't slept much. She'd gone back and forth on whether to even bring Luca, but ultimately decided there was no way she could leave him behind. This started with him, and he deserved to see it through. Still, she kept her arm protectively across his seat as they sat and waited. Booth 41. She'd memorized the layout from the market's website and walked the rows twice the night before on Google Street View. It was a permanent booth tucked near a corner with little foot traffic. The vendor C. buyer hadn't responded to any follow-up messages. No phone number. No profile. Just the time, the place, and silence. Now, as 10 a.m. approached, Denise scanned every new face that entered the market. She gripped her purse tighter, her heart thudding painfully with each passing minute. "I remember the bracelet," Luca said suddenly from the back seat. "She used to wear it when she helped me wash my hands. It made a sound like glass on a plate." Denise turned to him. "You're sure it's the same one?" He nodded without hesitation. "It's hers." They waited 5 more minutes. Then Denise opened her door and stepped into the heat. "Come on," she said, voice steady despite her nerves. "Let's find booth 41. The flea market buzzed with sound, barking vendors, squealing kids, the thump of distant music. Denise moved quickly, weaving between stalls, eyes scanning faces, tables, jewelry displays. Luca stayed close, holding her hand tightly. They passed booths selling costume rings, necklaces tangled like seaweed in cheap plastic bins. Nothing looked familiar. Nothing looked real. But then, near the end of the row, she saw it. Booth 41. It wasn't anything special, just a folding table beneath a stained beige tarp. Jewelry laid out on a velvet display cloth, old watches, rings, earrings. And near the corner, a small silver bracelet carefully arranged apart from the rest. Denise's breath caught. Even from 5 feet away, she recognized it. The thin chain, the small charm, the engraving LM forever. She stepped closer. Luca's hand clamped tighter in hers. The vendor stood with her back turned, rearranging something in a cardboard box. Put up. Sunglasses on. Shoulder-length brown hair. "Excuse me," Denise said carefully. "Is this still for sale?" The woman turned. Denise froze. The face was mostly obscured by the hood and glasses, but something was familiar: bone structure, posture, even the nervous way she shifted her weight. The woman glanced at Luca and something passed across her face, something quick and unreadable. "Yes," she said curtly, her voice quiet, almost hoarse. $20. Cash. Denise fumbled in her purse, but her fingers barely worked. She pulled out a bill and handed it over, eyes never leaving the bracelet. The woman dropped it into a paper bag and pushed it across the table. Denise hesitated. "Where did you get it?" she asked gently. The woman stiffened. "Estate sale," she muttered. "A long time ago." Then she reached for her box again, pretending to rearrange bracelets. But her hands trembled, and her face, though half-hidden, was pale beneath the sunglasses. Luca tugged Denise's arm and whispered, "That's her." Denise blinked. "What?" "That's Mommy," he said louder. "That's her voice. That's her." The woman froze. Her head turned slightly, just enough to glance at the boy. Then she dropped the box. Several pieces of jewelry clattered to the pavement. And in that moment, she ran. She turned and bolted behind the booth, ducking under a tent flap and disappearing into the maze of stalls. Denise called out instinctively, "Wait," but the woman was already gone. Shoppers looked up in confusion. A man asked if everything was all right. Denise shook her head and pushed Luca behind her, heart pounding. She looked around desperately, hoping for a glimpse of the woman's hoodie in the crowd, but there was nothing. Whoever she was gone. Back at the table, the bracelet still sat on the cloth. Another one. Denise slowly picked it up, this one missing the clasp, slightly more tarnished. A backup? A copy? Or the original? Her hands trembled as she placed it next to the one in the paper bag. Both had the same charm, same engraving, same weight. She took out her phone and snapped photos from every angle. Then, unsure what else to do, she took both bracelets and walked quickly back to the car. Luca silent beside her. Only when the doors were closed did she let herself breathe. "Was that really her?" she whispered. Luca stared out the window. Her voice sounded scared, but it was her. "I know it." Denise started the engine, her mind racing. If it was, she ran. She didn't say anything. Why would she run from us? Luca didn't answer. He just kept looking out the window. That night, Denise emailed the photos to the lead investigator from the original case, Detective Mark Reyes. He hadn't responded in years, but his name was still in her contacts. She included everything. The booth, the photos, the bracelet, the woman's reaction, Luca's words. She didn't expect a reply, but at 6:48 a.m., her phone buzzed. It was Reyes. His message was short. "We need to talk. Call me as soon as you can." Denise didn't wait. As soon as she saw the message from Detective Reyes, she called. The phone rang twice before he picked up, his voice sharp with caffeine and urgency. "I saw the photos," he said without greeting. "Tell me everything slowly." Denise repeated the story in full detail, the bracelet listing, the marketplace profile, the silent seller, the booth number, the voice, the way the woman had run. She emphasized Luca's reaction. "He said it was her," she added, without hesitation. "And the bracelet, it's not just similar. It's hers. I'd bet my life on it." On the other end, Reyes exhaled. "You said she ran?" "Yes." As soon as Luca spoke, there was a pause. Then, "I'm reopening the case, effective immediately, and I want you to bring that bracelet and the photos to the station today." "I can do that." "Denise," he added, voice lowering, "do not go back to the flea market. If this woman is Ashley, she may be in trouble, or she may not be safe. Either way, let us handle it." She agreed, though the command scraped against her instincts. She had seen Ashley, had heard her, but she also knew what guilt looked like, and fear, and that woman had radiated both. After hanging up, Denise gently woke Luca and told him they were going into town. He didn't ask questions. He simply nodded and put on his shoes. The police station hadn't changed in 5 years. Same beige walls, same scuffed tiles, same buzzing fluorescent lights, the same air that smelled faintly of coffee and dust and copy toner. Detective Reyes met them in the front lobby. He looked older, grayer, heavier around the eyes, but he still had the firm grip and measured voice Denise remembered. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Let's talk in my office." Luca sat quietly as the adult spoke. Reyes examined the bracelets under a magnifying glass, took photos, bagged them both for evidence. "We'll test the engraving, check for prints, DNA, anything we can salvage," he said. "They're both real silver, slightly different wear patterns. Could be the same model or duplicates, but your gut instinct still matters. Especially your grandson's." Then he turned to Luca. Do you remember what your mom's voice sounded like? Luca nodded. Would you be able to recognize it again? Another nod. Reyes pressed a button on his keyboard and pulled up security footage from the flea market, taken from a camera posted high above the vendor walkway. There's no clear facial shot, he said, but I had an officer pull this from the market's front entrance camera. They watched as the hooded woman arrived alone, carrying a tote bag. She set up the booth, laid out the jewelry, stayed mostly to herself. Then, at 10:14 a.m., she abruptly froze, looked to her right, and began packing with clumsy speed. At 10:16, she disappeared behind the booth and never returned. I've already filed a warrant request for the vendor registry, Reyes said. We'll have her name, real or fake, within 24 hours. Denise leaned forward. What do we do in the meantime? He hesitated. You said her seller profile used the name C. A buyer? Yes. I had one of our techs trace the IP address connected to that listing. It was created from a public Wi-Fi network 2 towns over. Coffee Bean Cafe, off Route 14. Denise felt her stomach flip. That's only 20 minutes away. I've sent a patrol there, but it's a long shot. Could have been anyone. Could have been days ago. She frowned. What if we messaged her again? Reyes shook his head. Now that she's spooked, she's gone. We're not gonna flush her out with texts. She's already moved. Unless, Denise said slowly, she doesn't know it was us. Reyes looked at her. Explain. I messaged her under my real name. She never saw Luca until he spoke. She didn't know it was his grandmother buying the bracelet. Reyes's eyes narrowed. So you think if someone else messaged her, she might respond? There was a silence. Then he nodded slowly. Let me think about that. Later that night, back at home, Denise sat on the couch staring at the empty spot on the table where the bracelet had rested for years, if only in her imagination. The house felt heavy. Luca had gone to bed early but hadn't spoken much. The shock had dulled into something quieter, deeper. Hope was no longer abstract. It had a face, a sound, a presence. Denise opened her laptop and stared at the last screenshot she'd taken. See. Buyer. Profile picture still blank. Last seen 9 hours ago. Without thinking, she opened a new browser window and created a dummy account. A different name. Blank photo. She searched for the bracelet listing again. It was gone. But something else appeared under the same username. Silver pendant, engraved. Cash only. Denise clicked on it. The photo was grainy, but familiar. A teardrop pendant she remembered from an old photo of Ashley at 17. Same charm. Same initials. New listing. Posted less than an hour ago. Denise's heart pounded as she typed a new message from the dummy account. Hi, I'm interested in the pendant. Is it still available? 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Then came a reply. Yes, pickup only. Same place. No questions. Denise copied the entire exchange and sent it to Reyes immediately. Then she sat in the dark, staring at the screen. She's still out there, she whispered. And now she was waiting. South Point Flea Market was quieter the second time. It was Sunday morning now, and the heavy weekend crowds had thinned. The buzz of the place had dimmed to a low murmur, vendors chatting softly, oldies playing faintly from a nearby radio, the scent of overcooked sausage lingering in the breeze. Detective Reyes hadn't wasted time. As soon as Denise forwarded him the new message from C. Buyer, he coordinated a small, quiet operation, 2 plainclothes officers assigned to monitor booth 41 and nearby exits. Another stationed near the parking lot entrance. Denise and Luca weren't involved this time. She stayed at home, glued to her phone, watching the minutes tick by with shallow breaths. She didn't know whether to pray for the woman to show up or to hope she stayed away. The reply to the pendant message had been brief. Pick up only. Same place. Same time. It was the exact phrasing she remembered Ashley using in text messages years ago. Almost clinical. No emojis. No fluff. Just direct and quiet and cautious. Reyes had caught that too. He'd asked her, "Did Ashley always speak that way in writing?" And Denise had replied without hesitation, "Only when she was scared." At 10:08 a.m., Officer Morel, one of the plainclothes posted near the booth, radioed in. "She's here. Same woman. Hood up, sunglasses. Just set up at 41. Reyes stood nearby, pretending to browse antique postcards, his sunglasses reflecting the booth 2 aisles away. He could see her now. Same slight build. Same hesitant movements. This time she had no box of jewelry. Just a small drawstring pouch and the pendant, laid out carefully on a velvet cloth. She wasn't talking to anyone. Barely made eye contact. At 10:15, the dummy account messaged her again. "I'm nearby. Can I come to your booth now?" The reply came instantly. "Yes, but only you." Reyes took a breath. He'd gone over this with the team already. They wouldn't approach directly. They'd let the interaction happen naturally, confirm identity, create space, then move in if necessary. No uniforms. No cuffs in public. The last thing they wanted was to spook her again. A female officer, Officer Trent, posing as the buyer, walked toward the booth. Reyes watched her from the corner of his eye as she approached and asked to see the pendant. The woman nodded, handed it to her. Her hands shook. Trent gently asked, "Did you make this yourself?" The woman said nothing. "Are you okay?" Trent pressed. Still silence. Reyes stepped slightly closer now, ears tuned to the tension in the air. Then the woman whispered something. Trent leaned in, and the woman bolted. Again. She grabbed the pouch, turned sharply, and ran into the maze of booths. "Go!" Reyes barked into the radio. "She's running east between rows." Officers gave chase, quietly, without shouting, not wanting to alarm the entire market. But this time they were ready. A plainclothes officer stepped from behind a booth and cut her off. The woman stumbled, backed away, but he gently raised his hands. "It's okay," he said. "We're not here to hurt you." The woman froze. Her breathing was ragged. Her hoodie had fallen slightly, and when she turned her face fully to the light, Reyes saw it. The jawline, the curve of the cheek. But it was the eyes that confirmed it. Haunted, familiar, and tired beyond her years. He stepped forward slowly. "Ashley." Her whole body seemed to collapse at the name. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just nodded once, then whispered, "I didn't mean to be found." They didn't arrest her. There were no charges, just quiet conversations. Officers cleared the area, let her sit under a tent with water, out of sight. Ashley Miller hadn't been missing. She'd been hiding, and now finally she was found. 2 hours later, in a small interview room at the county station, Reyes sat across from Ashley. She looked fragile, like a person who hadn't had consistent sleep or warmth in years. Her clothes were clean but secondhand. Her hands fidgeted constantly with the hem of her sleeve. "Why now?" he asked gently. "Why list the bracelet, the pendant, Ashley stared at her hands. I ran out of money. That bracelet, your bracelet, it was how you were found. I didn't think anyone would see it, she murmured. I didn't even think it mattered anymore. Reyes leaned in slightly. Where have you been all this time? Her eyes flicked up to meet his. Everywhere. Nowhere. Hiding. He waited. Finally, she whispered, it started that night, at the gas station, and she began to tell the truth. She remembered the cold tiles of the convenience store, the hum of the coffee machine. She remembered going to the back of the store to grab a cup and hearing the front door open again. A man had entered. She didn't see his face clearly, but when she turned toward the register, he was already there. Ashley paused, her voice shaking. He said my name. I don't know how he knew it. He said my name. Reyes didn't interrupt. I thought he had a weapon. I didn't see one. But he told me to walk out the back with him. That he had my son. Ashley squeezed her eyes shut. He said if I didn't go quietly, Luca would be gone before anyone could help. So she went. Through the back. Into the night. He didn't have a car. We walked through the woods. For hours. He wouldn't let me look back. I kept asking about Luca, but he wouldn't answer. The next few years, she said, were a blur. Abduction. Isolation. Control. I lived in a cabin. In the middle of nowhere. He made me cook, clean, pretend it was normal. Said if I ever tried to run, he'd find my boy and finish the job. Ashley said he died 2 years ago. Stroke. Middle of the night. I didn't call for help. I buried him behind the cabin and left. But I was scared. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't think anyone would believe me. So she drifted. From one town to the next. Selling things. Changing names. And I didn't try to come back because... She swallowed. I thought Luca would be better off without me. Safe. Happy. Not broken like I am. Reyes was quiet for a long time. You weren't the one who broke anything, Ashley, he said gently. He did. She wiped her eyes. Is he okay? He's more than okay. But he never stopped missing you. Ashley covered her mouth with both hands and sobbed silently. That night, back at home, Denise sat on the porch with her phone in her lap, staring at the photo Reyes had just sent her. Ashley, alive. Pale, tired, eyes sunken, but alive. She was coming back, and tomorrow she'd see her son again. Ashley sat in a quiet observation room at the station wrapped in a gray county-issued blanket, sipping hot tea from a paper cup. Every sound in the building made her flinch. The buzz of the hallway lights, the static from a nearby radio, even the soft creak of a chair. It had been 24 hours since she'd walked into the open, 24 hours since she'd heard her name spoken by a stranger in a public place. Detective Reyes sat beside her again, this time with a softer approach. The door was closed. No uniforms. No pressure. Just two people, one broken by years of silence and one trying to patch together the missing edges of a case gone cold. Ashley was no longer hiding, but she wasn't whole either. How much do you remember? Reyes asked gently. Ashley looked out the window. Everything. Every sound. Every minute. Reyes flipped open a file. We're trying to identify the man who took you. You said he had no ID. No license plates. Did he ever give a name? She shook her head. He called himself Denny. But I don't know if that was real. Was he local? I don't know. He didn't talk much about before. Just said he'd been watching. He knew I always stopped at that gas station. He said he picked the night. Reyes leaned back. So this was planned. She nodded. He knew my son's name. He knew the route we took. That sent a chill down Reyes's spine. He thought back to the early days of the investigation, the interviews, the grainy footage, the lack of prints. They'd assumed it was random, a moment of opportunity. But now it was clear Ashley had been stalked, targeted, taken, and kept. The forensic techs had already recovered the pendant and both bracelets. One had faint DNA traces matching Ashley's profile from old hospital records. The other, slightly newer, was clean, never worn. A decoy, Reyes said. She tried to sell a fake first, maybe to see if anyone was watching. The burner phone used to post the listings had been traced to a prepaid card purchased in another state. Dead end. The Wi-Fi login at the cafe was used by multiple customers daily. Also a dead end. But they did find something else. One of the officers had combed through older market camera footage from weeks, even months before the encounter. Ashley had been there multiple times. Always alone, always hooted, selling one or two small pieces of jewelry, then disappearing. She'd been circling home without ever stepping inside. Why the marketplace? Reyes asked when they met again. Why risk selling anything at all? Ashley stared at the floor. Money. That's the easy answer. But I think part of me wanted someone to see. Someone to recognize it. Even if I couldn't say it myself. He nodded. You did the hardest part. You survived. Ashley didn't reply. Meanwhile, Denise had been briefed. She wanted nothing more than to rush to the station and wrap her daughter in her arms. But Reyes insisted on caution. She's fragile. Let us ease into it. Give her time. The last 5 years weren't just hard, they were traumatic. She didn't even believe she could come home. Denise sat in the living room holding Luca's hand. He was still processing it all. Where has she been? He asked again. Somewhere far, Denise replied softly. But she's coming back. She remembered me? She never forgot you. The cabin came next. After securing a search warrant based on Ashley's testimony, local authorities traveled to a remote stretch of land in the next county over, a place dense with pine trees and forgotten roads. They found it exactly where she said it would be, a one-room log cabin tucked behind a hill, nearly invisible from the main path. Overgrown, rotting porch steps, a rusted antenna wired to the side. Inside, they found clear signs of long-term occupancy. Old food containers, a wood stove, handwritten notebooks, a child's drawings, simple crayon sketches of a woman and a small boy. One drawing in particular showed a woman behind bars and a small boy holding a key on the outside. Ashley had drawn them years ago, when she was still locked inside. And in the back room, under a loose floorboard, they found what they feared. An old rifle, duct tape, expired medication, and a rusted lockbox containing fake IDs, burner phones, and rolls of cash. Whoever Denny had been, he was prepared to vanish. But he never expected to die. Ashley's story about his death, a sudden stroke, was confirmed when a shallow grave was uncovered behind the cabin. Skeletal remains, later verified through dental records. He was a drifter with a criminal record under a different name. Dennis Halperin. History of assault. Evaded arrest twice in 2009. No family. No paper trail. No one ever looked for him. And no one had known what he'd taken. Until now. The case shifted from missing persons to kidnapping, with posthumous charges filed against Halperin. The press picked up the story within 48 hours. Mother missing for 5 years found alive in flea market encounter. Bracelet leads to break in cold case disappearance. Child recognizes mom's voice, reunites family. Denise turned down every interview. So did Ashley. The only thing they cared about now was what came next. Ashley sat in a guest room at the county safe house. The window was open. Sunlight poured in, and for the first time in years, she felt it on her face without fear. The social worker who sat with her asked quietly, "Are you ready to see him?" Ashley nodded. Yes, but I don't know if he'll recognize me. He doesn't need to, the woman said gently. He knows you. Ashley stared down at the small gift box in her lap. Inside was a new bracelet. Same silver chain. Same charm. But this time the engraving read, Luca and Mom, forever. The road to the cabin was barely a road at all. Just two tire grooves pressed into hardened mud, flanked by towering pines that blocked the morning sun. The county SUV rumbled slowly through the narrow path, every branch seeming to reach inward like long, skeletal fingers. Ashley sat in the passenger seat, hands clenched in her lap, her eyes fixed ahead. Detective Reyes was driving. He had insisted on escorting her personally. You don't have to go back, he reminded her softly. We've already documented everything. The texts are done. There's nothing there you need to see. Ashley shook her head. I need to. I need to remember what's real. They drove in silence the rest of the way, the tires crunching over scattered pine cones and dead leaves. After 10 more minutes, the trees thinned, revealing the clearing. And there it was, the cabin. It looked smaller than she remembered, more fragile, almost crooked in the morning light. The porch sagged. A shutter had fallen. The front door hung slightly ajar. A yellow strip of police tape flapped from a railing post, the only thing out of place in a space that had once felt like a tomb. Ashley stepped out of the car, her boots hitting the soft forest floor. She didn't wait for Reyes. She walked slowly, carefully, as if retracing invisible steps. Take your time, Reyes said behind her. She crossed the porch, avoiding the softest boards by memory. The door creaked as she pushed it open. The air inside was stale, still holding onto the scent of old wood, mold, and burnt matches. The living space was empty now. The couch was gone. So was the stove. Everything had been cleared, but the walls still whispered. She walked to the small bedroom, stood in the doorway, and stared. This was where she'd slept, if it could be called sleep. A mattress on the floor, no sheets, a single thin blanket she had to beg for during the first winter. The same four walls that had watched her cry silently through the nights. The same corners where she had hidden torn calendar pages counting the days, then the weeks, then the years. Reyes entered slowly behind her. That's where we found the drawings, he said quietly. The ones you made. Ashley nodded, her eyes misting. I drew them when I was afraid I'd forget what he looked like, what my son looked like. She stepped farther into the room, kneeling to the floor where the loose board had once been. He never let me have photos. I kept them all in my mind. Faces, moments, the way Luca used to look when he slept. I was terrified I'd forget his voice. Her hand trembled as she touched the spot. Reyes was quiet. Ashley stood and turned toward the wall where she had once scratched tiny notches with a bent fork. One for every month survived. They're gone, she whispered. We took photos, Reyes said gently. You'll have them. All of it. Ashley nodded but didn't speak. She walked back to the main room and stood by the window, staring at the trees. They used to trap her. Now they simply stood. I don't know how to be in the world again, she said finally. You don't have to know yet, Reyes said. You just have to start. Outside, the sun had risen fully. Ashley stepped off the porch and walked to the edge of the clearing. Her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Birds chirped overhead. A breeze moved through the trees like a slow breath. Behind the cabin, markers had been placed. One for the shallow grave, another where the Tex had found a discarded journal filled with Halperin's rants. Dark, manic thoughts. Control, fear, entitlement. There were passages written about Ashley. She's mine. She owes me her silence. She looks at me like I'm a monster. Maybe I am. I saw her smile once. I'll make sure she never does again. Reyes hadn't shown Ashley the journal. He wouldn't. She had lived the words already. There was no need for her to read them. Instead, he stood a few paces behind, giving her space. After a long pause, Ashley turned back to him. "I'm ready," she said. Later that afternoon, Reyes dropped her off at the county counseling center. Ashley had agreed to begin treatment immediately. Trauma recovery, grief therapy, PTSD support. There were steps she knew she had to take. Not just for herself, but for Luca. He was waiting, and she needed to be ready. She stepped out of the car and looked back once. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing me." Reyes gave her a small nod. "You did the hard part. We just helped find your way home." Ashley turned and walked into the building. And for the first time in 5 years, she didn't look back. That night, Denise received a call from the station. "She's ready," the voice said. Denise didn't hesitate. She packed a small overnight bag for Luca, just in case, and drove them both to the safe house. Her hands shook on the steering wheel the entire way. Luca was quiet beside her. Not scared, just unsure. Hopeful. When they arrived, a social worker met them at the front gate. "She's inside," the woman said, smiling. "She's nervous too." Denise took Luca's hand and walked with him toward the small, warmly lit building. Inside, Ashley sat on a couch, wearing clean clothes and holding the bracelet box in her lap. Her fingers fumbled with the lid. Her foot tapped uncontrollably on the floor. And when the door opened, she looked up. Her eyes landed on her son. And in that instant, he knew. "Mom," he whispered. Ashley stood slowly. Her hand flew to her mouth. She nodded, tears flooding her eyes. Luca didn't wait. He ran into her arms. They collapsed into each other, 5 years of silence breaking all at once. He sobbed into her shoulder, and she held him so tightly it seemed like she'd never let go again. Denise stood at the doorway, hand over her heart, tears in her eyes. No one spoke. No one needed to. They were home. Finally. The days that followed were quiet, purposefully so. The police, the media, even well-meaning neighbors were kept at a respectful distance. Ashley had been offered dozens of interviews, feature stories, and even a book deal, but she declined them all. Her only focus was Luca. Their reunion had been raw and overwhelming. After the tears had dried that first night, they sat together on the couch of the safe house, holding hands, saying nothing. Neither knew what to say or where to begin. Ashley had missed 5 birthdays, 5 Christmases, 5 Halloweens. She had missed Luca learning to read, losing teeth, making friends. And yet he was right there, still her son. Still the same boy who used to hum quietly to himself when he was tired, just like he did now. They slept in the same room that night. Ashley kept the small lamp on, afraid that if the lights went out, she might wake up and discover it had all been a dream. Luca fell asleep clutching her bracelet. Back at Denise's house, preparations were being made. The guest room was converted into Ashley's new bedroom. Clothes were bought. Therapy appointments scheduled. Legal paperwork began, restoring Ashley's identity, her custody rights, her access to the world that had moved on without her. It wasn't easy. There were layers to rebuild: trust, routine, boundaries. Sometimes Luca would wake up crying, unsure if his mother would still be there in the morning. Other times, Ashley would drift into silence during dinner, staring into her plate as memories surfaced without warning. One evening, she froze while watching a cartoon with Luca. A scene showed a cabin in the woods. She stood up abruptly and walked outside, trembling, barely breathing. Denise followed her and just stood beside her quietly until the moment passed. Ashley looked at her mother with glassy eyes. "I want to be normal again, but I don't even know what that means." Denise put a hand on her shoulder. "You're not the same, and you don't have to be. You just have to be here." Luca returned to school a week later. Ashley watched from the car as he walked up the front steps of the building, his backpack bouncing with every step. He turned once, gave her a little wave, and disappeared inside. She sat there for several minutes afterward, heart pounding. Later, when she picked him up, he climbed into the front seat and smiled. "I told them you were back," he said. "Mrs. Clark didn't believe me, but I told her." Ashley smiled weakly. "What did she say?" "She just started crying." The first time Ashley tried going to the grocery store alone, she stood in the frozen food aisle for 10 full minutes, staring at a bag of peas. The hum of the refrigeration units, the fluorescent lights, the constant movement of people, it was too much. She abandoned her cart and walked outside, leaning against the wall, trying to slow her breathing. A stranger asked if she was okay. She lied and said she was just dizzy. That night, she wrote in a notebook, "Survived a man, but frozen peas made me panic." "Why is that?" the therapist told her. "Because the man was your reality for 5 years. The frozen peas are the reminder that life went on without you. It's okay to feel both." Denise kept everything stable. She cooked, cleaned, and kept appointments organized. She also made space, giving Ashley time to bond with Luca, letting them figure each other out again. Luca was adjusting well, better than anyone expected. He was open and talkative, eager to tell stories about the things his mother had missed. He showed her photos of his kindergarten graduation, his Halloween costumes, the time he learned to ride a bike. "Grandma always saved the best ones," he said proudly. "So you'd see them one day." Ashley cried through most of it. One night, they sat in the living room watching old home videos Denise had pulled from an attic box. There was Luca as a baby, giggling in a bathtub. Then Luca at age 2, throwing a tantrum about green beans. And then a clip of Ashley. She looked so young, laughing, holding Luca in her arms, spinning him in the kitchen. Her hair was longer then, her eyes brighter. Ashley stared at the screen as if she were watching someone else entirely. Luca leaned into her. "You look the same, just more tired." She laughed through tears. "I feel more tired." He rested his head on her shoulder. "You're still my mom." Ashley returned to the flea market once, alone. Not to sell anything, just to walk. She moved past booth 41 slowly, pausing to look at the empty table. The velvet cloth was gone. No one recognized her. She didn't want to reclaim the space. She just needed to see it. On her way out, she passed a jewelry vendor she didn't remember. The woman offered her a smile and said, "Looking for anything special?" Ashley stared at a simple necklace with a sun pendant. "No," she said softly. "I already found what I lost." 3 weeks after their reunion, Ashley stood in the kitchen packing Luca's lunch. He had requested peanut butter and jelly, cut into triangles. As she placed the last slice into the container, he walked in and said, "You do it the same way Grandma does, but it tastes better when you do it." Ashley smiled. "That's because moms add secret ingredients." "Like what?" "Love," she said, tapping his nose. He rolled his eyes but smiled back. It was the kind of moment she used to dream about. Now it was real. She still had panic attacks. Still woke up at 3 a.m. sometimes, heart racing, convinced someone was watching her through the window. But every day the weight lifted a little. Every day she chose to stay. Later that night, Luca handed her a drawing. It was a picture of their house, crudely sketched. Him on the swing, her on the porch, a sun above them and a line of hearts in the sky. "I drew you with a smile," he said proudly, "because that's how you look now." Ashley knelt, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Then I guess I'm doing something right." For weeks after her return, Ashley kept a small notebook by her bed. At first, it was just for therapy assignments, jotting down feelings, triggers, memories. But soon, the pages began to fill with moments from the years she had been gone. Not just trauma, but details she feared would fade. She wrote about the seasons, the way winter wrapped the cabin in absolute silence, how the wind howled like distant voices. She wrote about the birds that visited the pine trees outside her window, the patterns she noticed in their wings, the names she gave them. She wrote about the man who had taken her, Denny, though she now knew his real name had been Dennis Halperin. And she wrote about the quiet, the terrible, numbing quiet. There were no mirrors in the cabin, no clocks, no photographs. Dennis believed that time and reflection would weaken her will. She was not allowed to mark days to measure change, so she kept a calendar in her head. She counted meals, counted sunrises, counted times he left for town. She had only tried to escape once during the second year. Dennis had forgotten to lock the door one night. She made it half a mile barefoot before he caught up to her. After that, the chain stayed on her ankle for months. Ashley never wrote about that in full detail. Some memories were too sharp. In therapy, she began to share more. Her sessions were long, exhausting, but necessary. Her therapist, a calm, middle-aged woman named Dr. Haley, never pushed too hard. She simply asked, "What feels important today?" One day, Ashley brought in the bracelet. "This," she said, laying it on the table, "is how I found my way back." Dr. Haley studied it quietly. "Why did you decide to sell it?" Ashley hesitated. "Because I had to see if someone still remembered me. I couldn't say it out loud. I wasn't ready. But maybe the bracelet could say it for me." "You were testing the world?" "I was testing hope," Ashley replied, "seeing if it would respond." Dr. Haley nodded slowly. "And it did." Ashley smiled faintly. "Yeah, it did." Detective Reyes continued to check in once a week, sometimes just by phone. He kept her updated on the legal process. Dennis Halperin's identity had been fully confirmed. His criminal history stretched back decades. A ghost who moved state to state, leaving destruction in his wake. Assault, kidnapping, drug possession, restraining orders, always under different names. Ashley wasn't his first victim, but she had been the one who survived longest. Thanks to dental records and DNA, 2 cold cases from the early 2000s were now reopened. Women who had vanished in Tennessee and Arkansas, both with similar profiles. One had also been a young mother. Another had worked at a roadside diner. Ashley stared at the reports for a long time. "Why me?" she asked Reyes one day. "Why did he keep me?" Reyes didn't pretend to have a comforting answer. "We don't know. Some people want control more than anything else. He saw you, your son, your routine, and he made a plan." Ashley looked away. "I was just pumping gas." "Exactly," Reyes said. "You did nothing wrong." Still, it haunted her. the way a single moment had split her life in two. Luca was curious, not in a morbid way, but in a quiet, thoughtful way only children possess. One evening, while they were folding laundry, he asked, "Did it hurt?" Ashley blinked. "What, sweetheart? When you were gone, were you hurt?" She paused. "Sometimes, but not the way you might think." He folded a shirt carefully. "Did you cry?" "Almost every day." "Did you think about me?" "Every single day," she said without hesitation. "You were the only thing that kept me alive." Luca seemed to accept this. He didn't ask more. But later, he left a note on her pillow. "You don't have to cry anymore. I'm here now. And I love you." Ashley kept that note tucked inside her journal. As the weeks turned into months, Ashley began to build a new rhythm. She took morning walks. She volunteered at the library once a week. She cooked dinner with Denise. She helped Luca with homework. One afternoon, she noticed a woman staring at her in the supermarket. At first, she thought it was pity, recognition from someone who had seen the news coverage. But the woman approached quietly and said, "You're her, aren't you?" Ashley stiffened. "I don't do interviews." "No, no," the woman said quickly. "I'm not here for that. I just wanted to say, I followed your story, and I wanted to thank you, because I left an abusive marriage after reading about you. I thought, if she can survive 5 years in the woods, I can survive one more week in that house." Ashley's mouth opened, but no words came. The woman touched her arm lightly and said, "You reminded me I was worth saving." When she walked away, Ashley stood frozen, overwhelmed. That night, she wrote in her notebook, "Maybe surviving wasn't just for me. Maybe it's for someone else too." Ashley didn't tell her story to many people, but she began writing pieces of it down, not in the journal, but in a Word document titled "If I Disappear Again." It wasn't for publishing. It was for Luca. Someday, when he was older, she would give it to him. Let him read everything she couldn't explain now. Let him understand the choices she made, the days she almost gave up, the reasons she never did. In the final paragraph, she wrote, "If you're reading this, it means I trust you with all the pieces. Even the broken ones. Even the parts that never healed the way I hoped. You were the thread I followed home, even when I couldn't see it anymore. You were the reason I stayed alive, and the reason I became someone worth coming back to." The first time Ashley visited the gas station again, it was raining. It had taken nearly a year to build up the courage, to come back to the place where everything had changed, where the fabric of her life had been torn apart with the slam of a van door and the hiss of a fuel pump. She drove there alone. Denise offered to go with her, but Ashley declined. "This is something I need to do by myself," she said. The gas station looked exactly the same. Same green roof, same flickering neon open sign, same weathered benches out front. But something about it felt smaller, quieter, as if time had sealed the wound without ever healing it. Ashley parked and just sat in the car for a moment, watching the entrance. People moved in and out, college students, truckers, families. No one noticed her. No one recognized her. That was part of the comfort. She stepped out into the drizzle and walked up to pump number 4, the same one she'd used that night. She could still remember the squeak of the handle, the cold metal beneath her fingers, the way her reflection looked in the glass of the pump screen. She didn't cry. Instead, she pulled a small object from her coat pocket, a silver charm bracelet, the original, the one that had brought her home. She looked down at it for a long moment, then walked around the side of the building where a wooden fence marked the edge of the lot. Carefully, reverently, She placed the bracelet on a small nail protruding from the wood. It would rust there, disappear eventually. But she didn't need it anymore. She had already been found. Back home, Luca was waiting with a surprise. When Ashley opened the front door, she found a row of photos taped to the hallway wall. Prints from their first beach day, their first holiday together, Luca's soccer game, a messy pancake breakfast, and in the middle, a photo Ashley didn't recognize. It was of her, smiling, tired, holding a mug of coffee at the kitchen table. Her hair was pulled back. She wore no makeup, but she looked peaceful. At the bottom, in Luca's handwriting, "This is the mom I remember, even when you were gone." Ashley felt her knees weaken. She slid down the wall, pulled her son into her arms, and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." "I never did," he said softly. "I just didn't know how to find you." That spring, Ashley started speaking at survivor support groups, quietly at first just listening, then gradually telling pieces of her own story. She never used Halperin's name. She didn't need to. She focused on the moments of strength, not just the pain. On the drawings she made. On the risk of selling the bracelet. On the exact second she heard her name spoken aloud again. She always ended with the same thought. When everything was stripped away, the only thing I held on to was this tiny voice in the back of my head whispering, "Someone out there is still looking for you. You just have to be alive when they find you." And every time someone in the group cried, not from pity but from recognition, they understood. By Luca's 11th birthday, life had found a rhythm again. Ashley had enrolled in online college courses. Denise had begun traveling again, now that Ashley was home to anchor the family. Luca had friends, hobbies, and had recently discovered a love for cooking. At his birthday party, he made his own cake. "Chocolate with raspberry filling," he declared proudly. Ashley took a photo of him blowing out the candles. Later that night, she printed it and taped it into her journal. Underneath, she wrote, "He made a wish. I didn't ask what it was, but I know what mine is, that this becomes our normal, not because we forget the past, but because we chose to build something beautiful beyond it." On the 1-year anniversary of her return, Ashley, Denise, and Luca took a weekend trip to the coast. They rented a small cabin by the water, not isolated, not hidden, but warm and cheerful. The kind of place where you could hear the waves all night and fall asleep to the rhythm of something bigger than yourself. On the final night, Luca stood at the shoreline skipping stones. Ashley walked up beside him, wrapped her arms around his shoulders, and rested her chin gently on his head. "Do you know what today is?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, skipping a stone. "It's been 1 year." Ashley took a deep breath. "I'm so proud of you." Luca looked up at her. "Why me?" "Because you brought me home." He grinned, skipped another stone, and then said, "Well, technically, you walked into the market." Ashley laughed. "Okay, fine. But you were the reason I did." They stood in silence for a moment, the sky painted in gold and lavender. Then Lucas said, "Next year, let's go somewhere new, like the mountains." Ashley nodded. "Anywhere you want." He paused. "As long as you're with me." "Always," she whispered, and they stood there side by side as the waves came in. Full circle.